G'day and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at a comprehensive guide to the Emerald Dream, how to unlock it, what you can do in it, and the various rewards you can obtain. Now when you log in on your first character you will receive the Call of the Dream quest line, or quest that will begin the Coalition of Dreams quest line. To access this quest line, you are heading to the Anaran Plains, where you will basically begin a very short intro section of quests that you will have to do before you can gain access to the Emerald Dream. Now, these intro quests are very quick. We're talking like super duper quick, very straightforward. You need to do a little bit of stealth, a little bit of reconnaissance, find one rare, and you're done. So it's a super quick quest line. Once you've done that, you will unlock a skip on your alts that you will be able to access. So you only have to do it once. You don't have to do it more than once. It's a very straightforward system. Once you've done that, you will receive the Call of the Dream quest. This quest is pretty straightforward and essentially just requires you to head over and enter the Emerald Dream. So it's pretty simple. Honestly, the whole process took around 15 minutes with cutscenes, so it honestly wasn't that intensive, and you immediately get a new dragon riding mount upon the entry. So I would say overall, at least for me, what I would consider pretty good stuff. Now obviously, once you enter the Emerald Dream, what should you start with? Well, complete the main quest. There is currently 4 parts out of these 7 quest lines that are pretty straightforward and available. They will drop almost an entire set of 415 gear, which is going to be pretty helpful for the majority of players. I would say overall it's definitely something you want to consider, because you get a bunch of great loot, as you can see here. You get a whole bunch of rep, and it will unveil the map to you, and you can pick up some flight points. Generally speaking, it's a great way to operate. It also gives you some various resources that you'll need for the other activities that will occur. So we're talking dewdrops, we're talking basically seeds, all these things which will become apparent in future, but essentially do have some purpose now. So it's definitely something to consider. Not saying it is the absolute number one thing you should do, but it is definitely something that is super duper helpful, because especially if you're coming in fresh on an alt, maybe you've just returned, being able to grab essentially a full set of 415 gear, flight stones, and just a whole bunch of other various resources is going to be quite helpful towards you. And I think for me, it's definitely something you may want to consider bringing or using. So obviously, the main quest line aside, once you've completed that, you should be able to access the majority of the map. At this point, of course, as well, one thing I will say is you also do essentially want to look at doing these side activities while you're questing, but we can get to that a little bit later on. So to cut a long story short, at this point you are now ready to begin some of the side quests. Pick up a lot of these as they help you with basically understanding some of the various currencies and mechanics that will be happening. For example, if you're not familiar, it will introduce you to Drake crests or flame crests or upgrade crests. It will introduce you to flight stones. It will introduce you to some of the various mechanics that occur in the actual game itself. So definitely something to consider, and pick up all of those side quests as soon as you can. It really helps to introduce you to what's going on. Now, of course, outside of that, we now have the weekly quest. So the big weekly quest is obviously a worthy ally, Dream Warden. This quest is great for 2 reasons. One, pick it up nice and early, so you complete it while you are completing the kind of quests and side stories. But it's also fantastic because it drops a champion level piece of gear, it drops a whole bunch of resources, and it drops reputation, which is obviously super duper helpful. So definitely something I would say you want to consider picking up, because it is highly valuable and really honestly quite good, at least from my perspective. So please make sure that you do this quest. It's the first thing you should be picking up. Next, let's talk about the seeds. So this is basically a new kind of event. It is called an Emerald Bounty event, and essentially what you do here is you plant seeds, which you will pick up from defeating rares, completing world quests, looting mobs, and you will be able to trade or hand in these seeds. You'll be able to plant them, and then what you'll have to do is you are going to have to essentially contribute dewdrops. Now, if you'll pick up dewdrops basically as you quest throughout the area, but you can also pick them up during the actual planting of the seed themselves. A whole bunch of enemies will spawn, critters will spawn that you can step on, bushes will spawn that you can pull and loot from, and essentially these will drop dewdrops that you can use to grow your seed. Now, if you manage to successfully grow the seed, depending on the grade of the seed, you will receive a whole bunch of rewards. Now, most seeds will drop basically Drake crests, which is obviously the big component of them, but they also, if they are purple, have a chance at a mount, which is something pretty cool. So there's quite a few mounts that you can pick up this way, so highly suggest that you get onto completing as many of these as possible, not only for upgrading but just in general. It is a pretty good little kind of cause, so definitely consider Emerald Bounties along the way, one of the main priority events to do while you are in the Emerald Dream. Speaking of Emerald Bounties, let's push on to the Emerald Frenzy. Now, Emerald Frenzy is basically a little world event that will pop up on your map, whereby essentially you can pick up a seed for Emerald Bounty. It is essentially basically just for that. It's to pick up resources to perform Emerald Bounties. You will be able to do twice an hour to them, and you'll get a ton of Emerald Dewdrops, and basically you'll get bonus objectives, and you can get a whole bunch of seeds. So Emerald Frenzies kind of coincide with Emerald Bounties. They are essentially a kind of cooperative objective that you want to complete, so you can obviously obtain some good rewards, and you get flight stones as well. So there is definitely incentive for completing them. Try and do them as they pop up. Next, we have the big weekly world event, which is the Super Bloom, which is obviously huge. It's very similar to like the Researcher event in the Loam Niffin Caverns, and essentially what it is basically you begin this kind of little event where basically you guide this giant tree ant, spruce bloom, spruce tree, super spruce, whatever his name is, her name, the tree, and essentially you guide them through a couple objectives. Spruce crown, there we go. And basically, Spruce Crown, you guide through a couple of objectives. It's kind of broken into just 3 main segments. Essentially, basically, you have the first where you kind of get rid of bugs. Then the second one is obviously where you kind of dig holes. And then the third one is basically you take on a whole bunch of enemies. It's not anything too crazy. When I say that, I mean like it's usually a Zerg event, so you don't have to get too crazy, but depending on how well you do, depending on how much bloom you pick up, you will get a scaling reward. Now, the reward that you get obviously is going to be dependent on how well you do, but predominantly it contains flight stones and also dream seeds, which is pretty good, along with Dragon Isle supplies. And once per week you can receive the Cache of Overblooming Treasures, which is a giant purple bag that contains a lot of really, really good rewards. So again, it's another kind of weekly first, but also farmable way to obtain a pretty decent supply of rewards. So it's definitely something to consider again. If you are looking at obviously farming yourself some pretty good resources that you'll need to essentially take on or upgrade your gear. So it's a very, very valuable event. Highly suggest for players to do it. It's something that's going to score you some pretty good gear, and it's also a pretty high priority thing. Once you have completed the phases, you'll take on the boss, and the boss himself is again a Zerg situation. But once you defeat the boss, you will have an opportunity of obtaining seeds from the boss's defeat, as well as also obtaining the loot bag from the weekly quest, as well as also obtaining whatever loot bags you get from the super bloom. Now you can obviously only get 1 purple cache, but you can get the 3 loot bags outside the purple cache pretty consistently. So it's definitely something I would say to you to consider, and you should definitely pick it up. Lots of emerald dewdrops, lots of good ways to farm those seeds to really augment your gear. So I think some really, really good stuff from me personally, and yeah, it's 100% definitely the best way to pick up some good rewards. Next we have world quests. These are pretty self-explanatory, and world quests don't do too much any different than what you should be used to. World quests are basically exactly the same as they've always been, dropping some flight stones, etc. So there's nothing too crazy. It's great for farming rep and getting flight stones and gear, but that's really honestly about it. Same stock standard stuff you're used to. World rares are also very similar. They have changed them slightly in that they have like a little kind of pre-event to trigger some of the world rares, or most of the rares, and you should see essentially a whole bunch of like kind of little rares that can pop up. Defeating them gives you a little bit of reputation, of course, which is great. Slumbering Dream fragments, which are also pretty good, which you can use, to pick up some mounts, and flight stones, small dream seeds, and basically some Dragon Isle supplies. Nothing too crazy. Rares feel like the kind of not so important mechanic to kind of focus on here. So definitely something to consider, but honestly speaking, I wouldn't make them a priority farm. They really are just there more as an auxiliary method. They help you pick up some pets, but realistically there's nothing too crazy, at least when looking at everything and considering everything that's involved with it. So yeah, next we have the reputation with the Dream Wardens. This is obviously something you can farm, and I'll do a guide on how to farm it and what the best methods are, but there are a ton of rewards, so it's definitely a great priority sell for you to obviously kind of pick up some rep here and look at getting some really nice rewards early on and some buffs for while you are exploring the Emerald Dream. The next kind of thing you can focus on is dragon riding and glyphs. Obviously, with the advent of a new zone, we have 8 new dragon riding glyphs that you can obviously pick up, which is great, but essentially nothing too wild here. There are some new talents for dragon riding as well. We have some upgrades to slipstream basically, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that's realistically about it. There's not anything too wild that you need to do. So this is a pretty self-explanatory kind of section. So yeah, pretty straightforward. Next we have the world boss. I was not fortunate enough to have the world boss spawn while I was up, but the world boss is up, a new one for the Emerald Dream Zone. This is Orosita, the Hibernator. Basically a giant bear with a faux hawk, and yeah, great way to earn loot as well. Then you have some side activities, which are Dream Infusions and Spring Blooms. These are some side goals that I will be covering in another video, so that you can see how to get them. And yeah, that's basically it. So good luck and enjoy, farm some mounts and pets, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then, take care, stay safe, and if you've got any questions, let me know. Till then, see you guys next time. Bye.